from Tennessee State University, and he's given us some information in reference to Africans in the cities. And let's pick up where we left off, Dr. Sanford, and have you to talk about some aspects of separation and segregation and some of the other things that you like to deal with during this last 10 minutes of Africans in the cities.
Okay. Well, and as we look back historically and coming out of slavery with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, there were rules and regulations and actually laws that were put in place that were legal to segregate people in the South. And this was very much a part of the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson that made everything legal to be separated. And we know out of slavery through Jim Crow laws for 81 years, things were separate with unwritten laws that made things segregated here in the South. So when people made that great migration to the northern areas, they really moved to try to have a certain freedom, opportunity, and as we mentioned in the last segment, job opportunities to work in industries. But as they got there and increasing numbers became, we make a distinction in sociology between overt type of racism and segregation, where laws are there to say that, and then covert. And those things that are overt are pretty much legalized. They are there, and you kind of know your position. But when it's covert, it's beneath the surface. It's not so much written in law. But people might still act in very prejudiced, racist, and discriminatory ways. So we can find that was starting to emerge in the northern cities. Although African Americans migrated and went into the urban areas and they were pretty much concentrated in one area, if they would go out to get jobs eventually, they found a lot of discrimination. Or in many instances, they may have been discriminated against going into other areas to have upward mobility and housing. You can see even within this campaign, one of the presidential candidates discriminated against African Americans to live in their apartment complex. And so this type of racism and prejudice was very much a part of the North as well as in the South, but there was this subtle difference that was there. But it was indeed present, and it was discriminatory toward African Americans that treated them in such an inequitable way that it not allowed them to advance within that area as others could and live freely. But it was much better than living in the South. But there were still great problems that were there.
And so, and you often talk about the sociological impact in terms of how Africans lived and some of the struggles that they had to overcome. Talk in reference to some of those things.
Well, that's a peculiar institution going back from slavery all the way. It was horrible. Institutions that are so important were just broken up. People doing that first forced migration, of course, families were destroyed, laws saying that you can't learn, didn't have medical care, housing was awful. You know, if you watch any of the film that are out here today, 12 Years of Slavery, which is kind of interesting just to bring that up, a person that had migrated to the North and was just doing his work and then got captured and pulled back into the South, and it was a person that was enslaved there, because there were free African Americans even during the earlier time periods before the Great Migration. And some even as early as, say, 1860 to 1870 went west. They were free African Americans. And some of those same free African Americans went to the North, but many went out west into the California area. But it was kind of an interesting phenomenon to see that they still had to experience this indifferent treatment. But that enslavement was just a horrible thing when you look at things that are going on today, because culture is defined as knowledge, customs, language, values that are passed down from one generation to the next generation. So if you think in terms of 244 years of enslavement, 81 years of Jim Crow laws that led into legal segregation, how could one group fare in an equal way or balanced way in a society that says you're supposed to have education, economic opportunity, but you have forced desegregation and racism that prevents that? And now those born in the 80s and 90s might feel that there's a sense of, oh, everything is just fine now. However, there's some still connections that are going on with what happened from 1619 to the present, within many of the environments and families that are present today. we still have a disproportionate amount of people in very high percentage as the first time of graduating from high school and college. You know, first generation still today. Why? Because of the culture here in America and how it was founded. Alex de Tocqueville, for instance, he came here during the time of slavery and was quite surprised. He came here to look at our penal system. And when he came here to look at this prison system that they felt in comparison to the old world was much better, he was quite surprised because he saw people who were enslaved. Enslavement was still present. The old world had slavery going on, but they got out of it. But America was still doing it. And he felt that we would never reach a true democracy because of the very foundations, the pillars of our institutions were based on slavery. So he, in his book, Democracy in America, his central thesis is saying that we will never reach a true democracy because of how it was founded.
How it started.
How it started.
Very good. You know, in terms of trying to move toward that, we've got about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Let's say something in terms of the efforts that were made by Africans to improve themselves. You know, NAACP, the Arab League, and etc. It didn't go. They didn't go so very far, but at least it helped to stem some of the tides in reference to this discrimination. Speak to some of those.
Well, the great Dr. W.B. Du Bois and others founded the NAACP, and this was the great Niagara movement, where they founded there. A lot of other European